He stood frozen under the dim streetlight, clutching the small note in his hand. The paper crumpled slightly from his grip, and the words on it burned in his mind. He felt the cold wind brush against his neck, and shiver ran down his spine. He tried to convince himself it was a prank, that some kid had slipped it there for fun, but the handwriting was unmistakably childish, yet deliberate. Like she had planned this moment for days, maybe weeks. His gaze drifted down the empty street, the buildings, casting long dark shadows that stretched toward him like fingers reaching for something unseen. Every sound seemed louder than it should have been: the distant hum of a car, the flutter of a newspaper in the gutter, the faint sound of someone breathing. Far off in the darkness, he glanced at his bike again, the black leather gleaming in the faint light, and the chrome reflecting the street lamp in sharp angles. He felt exposed standing there alone at the edge of the city, and yet he could not bring himself to leave, as if the note had anchored him to that spot, as if something invisible held him in place. He pulled the paper closer to his chest and read the words again. She knew about the accident, about the night he thought was buried in silence. She said she had seen him, and she warned him to move before it was too late. The memory hit him suddenly and violently, like a punch to the chest. The night of the accident, a man had fallen under his bike, and he had left him there panicked and afraid. Now, a lifetime later, a small girl knew, and had reached out in this strange, cryptic way. He could feel the sweat on his back soaking through his jacket, the air pressing down on him like a weight that he could not shake. He looked around one more time, but the street was empty, only the faint rustle of leaves, and a distant barking dog broke the silence. He thought of calling someone for help, but his phone was dead. The battery long gone from the long day of riding. He considered leaving the note behind, but the words burned in his mind, and he could not tear his eyes away from them. She had written more than just a warning. There were hints in the way she phrased things. Clues that pulled at the corners of his memory and tugged at the dark places he had tried to forget. Che shadow moved at the edge of the street, and he froze, heart hammering in his chest. He squinted into the darkness, trying to make out the shape, but it was gone as soon as he looked. The hairs on his arms standing on end. He stepped back toward his bike, and the note slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the ground like a dead leaf. He bent down, slowly picking it up, his hands trembling just a little, and read the words again. She said she would be waiting at the place where the street met the alley, the one behind the old warehouse where no one went anymore. She wrote that she had something important to show him, something that would explain everything. If he was brave enough to see. He felt a sudden rush of fear and curiosity fighting in his chest, the urge to run, and the urge to know clashing violently. He thought about calling the police, but the words in the note warned against it. They were careful in their phrasing, almost knowing what he would think, almost predicting his every move. He shoved the paper into his pocket and swung himself onto the bike, the engine roaring to life under his fingers, but the sound seemed to echo too loudly in the empty street as he rode toward the alley. He felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Every shadow seemed to shift and move, and he caught glimpses of movement in the corners of his eyes that vanished when he turned his head. He tried to shake it off, telling himself it was the wind or the reflection of the streetlights, but the feeling persisted like a weight pressing down on his chest. The alley was darker than he expected, the warehouse looming at the far end like a black monolith. He slowed the bike and brought it to a stop, a few feet from the rusted doors, the paint peeling and the wood rotting from years of neglect. The note said she would be there waiting, and he felt a strange mixture of dread and anticipation. His fingers brushed against the note in his pocket, and he took a deep breath, the cold air biting at his lungs, and stepping off the bike, he felt the gravel crunch under his boots. He moved cautiously toward the warehouse, each step measured, each sound amplified. In the silent night the doors were slightly ajar, a dark slit leading into the unknown. He paused at the entrance, his heart pounding in his chest, and he thought about turning back, but the note had set something in motion, something that could not be undone. He pushed the door open, slowly, the hinges creaking, and felt the sudden chill of the inside hit him like a wave inside the warehouse. Shadows clung to the corners, and the air smelled of dust and rust. He squinted to make out shapes, and saw movement far across the floor. A small figure standing in the darkness watching him. His pulse quickened. It was her, the girl from the note, her eyes wide and serious, and she held something small and wrapped in cloth. Her presence made the space feel alive, as if the walls themselves were waiting for what was about to happen. He wanted to speak to her, to ask questions, but the words caught in his throat. He only moved closer cautiously. The girl took a step forward, her hand extended slightly toward him, and he noticed the object in her grip. It looked like a key or a small box. He could not tell from this distance. She spoke, but her voice was soft, almost a whisper carried by the cold wind that blew through the broken windows, telling him to trust her and to follow if he wanted answers about the past and about the secret that had haunted him for years. He swallowed hard, the weight of the moment Pressing on him heavier than he had expected, he took a step forward and then another until he was within reach of her. Warehouse seemed to shift around him, the shadows twisting and lengthening, and he felt a shiver run down his spine. He reached out to take the object and the girl let him grasp it, her fingers brushing his hand, and a chill ran through him like electricity. The object was heavier than he expected, and cold to the touch. He felt the pulse of something inside it, or maybe it was just his own fear echoing in his chest. He backed away slightly, holding the object, and looked into her eyes again, and saw the seriousness there, the understanding, far beyond her years. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, and turned toward a narrow doorway at the back of the warehouse. She gestured for him to follow, and he did without a word, the gravel crunching under his boots and the shadows seeming to close in around him, the air thick with anticipation and something unspoken. The doorway led to a staircase descending into darkness, his hand brushing against the cold railing, and he could feel the dampness in the air as he went down. He could hear the girl moving silently ahead, and the object in his hands seemed to hum or pulse with an energy he could not explain. He wondered if he was imagining it, or if it was real, and he realized that leaving now was no longer an option, that the note had set in motion a chain of events that could not be stopped. At the bottom of the stairs, a small room opened before him, dimly lit by a single bare bulb swinging gently from the ceiling. The girl stood in the center of the room and set the object down on a crate she had prepared for it. She gestured for him to look, and he stepped closer, slowly, the anticipation gnawing at him, and the shadows moving as if alive around the walls. The object was revealed to be a small journal with a worn leather cover, and inside were pages filled with writing and sketches that made his stomach tighten. He recognized some of the handwriting, some of the sketches, places, and events he had tried to forget. The journal was hers, but also somehow his past, intertwined with her presence here, and the warning on the note began to make sense. It was not just a warning, it was a message, a key, a way to face what he had long buried. He looked at the girl and saw the seriousness in her eyes, the way she waited silently for him to understand. He felt a shiver of fear mixed with relief. The shadows of the warehouse seemed to recede slightly as he opened the journal and read the first lines, and the room seemed to hold its breath as the past and the present collided in that single moment. He felt the weight of the journal in his hands, the pages rough under his fingers, and a cold knot tightening in his stomach. As if every word he read pulled him deeper into something he could not escape. The girl stood silently watching, her eyes wide and unblinking, and he felt the strange sense that she had always known him, and always known he would come here. He flipped the first page, and the handwriting seemed familiar yet foreign, as if it carried the echoes of a past he had tried to forget. The sketches were detailed outlines of the streets, the alleys, the corners of the city where he had hidden his secrets, the places he had never dared to revisit. The air in the room felt thick and alive, the single bulb swinging above, casting moving shadows across the walls, and he could swear that the shadows themselves whispered in the corners, urging him to continue reading. He leaned closer, the journal trembling slightly in his hands, and he saw a page with a date and a name, the name of the man from the accident, the one he thought he had left behind forever, the one he had tried to erase from memory, and now here it was staring back at him in messy, childish handwriting that somehow contained more truth than he had ever faced before. The girl stepped closer, placing a small hand on his arm, and he flinched at the sudden touch, but did not pull away. Her eyes locked onto his, and he saw an understanding there that went beyond her years. She did not speak, but somehow communicated that he was ready to see the truth that he had run from for too long. The journal fell open to a page that showed a map drawn in pencil. The streets twisted like a maze, and a path marked with small symbols that seemed familiar yet coded. He realized these were clues leading him to the place where the accident had really begun, the place where everything had spiraled out of control. He swallowed hard and closed his eyes for a moment, the memories crashing back like waves against rocks, the screams, the flashing lights, the fear, the smell of oil and blood, and the sound of the sirens that never arrived. He opened his eyes again, and the girl nodded silently, signaling that the next step was his decision. He felt fear clawing at his chest, but also a strange determination, a need to finish what had begun long ago. He stepped forward, following the path on the map, the girl moving silently beside him, as if guiding him through the darkness. The path led them through narrow alleyways, the air growing colder, the shadows denser, and the sense of being watched stronger at every step. He kept looking over his shoulder, half expecting to see someone following them, someone angry or waiting for him to fail, but there was nothing, only the wind, the faint scuff of his boots, and the soft patter of hers behind him. He realized that this journey was not just about the past, it was about the choices he had made, the secrets he had kept, and the courage he had never summoned before. They arrived at an abandoned building, the walls cracked and the windows shattered, and he could feel the heaviness of the place pressing down on him. He paused at the entrance, and the girl gestured for him to enter. He hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of what lay inside the air, thick with dust and the lingering sense of lives long gone. He stepped inside, and the floorboards creaked under his weight, the shadows moving like living creatures across the walls. In the center of the room was a small crate covered in a dusty tarp. The girl walked ahead and pulled the tarp away, revealing a small metal box, the same shape as the object she had first given him on the bike. His heart pounded in his chest. He knelt down and opened the box, and inside was a stack of photographs and letters. The photographs showing moments from his past, the accident, the man he thought he had left behind, the witnesses he had ignored, and the letters written in a trembling hand explaining the truth, the guilt, the sorrow, and the small acts of bravery he had never acknowledged. He sank to his knees, holding the photographs and letters, the reality of the past crashing down around him. He realized the girl had known the truth all along and had orchestrated this moment to make him face it. She had left notes, clues, and maps guiding him through a maze of memory and fear, forcing him to confront what he had hidden even from himself. The shadows seemed to recede slightly, and the air grew lighter as if the room itself was relieved that the truth had been revealed. The girl finally spoke softly, her voice barely above a whisper, and it carried a weight that made his heart ache. She told him that the man from the accident had survived, and that the town had forgotten what had really happened, only he had remembered. And now it was time to make amends. He felt tears prick at his eyes, and the heaviness in his chest began to lift slowly, as if every secret he had carried for years was finally being released. He spent hours in the room going through every photograph, every letter, every sketch in the journal. He felt the threads of his past unraveling and reconnecting in a way that made sense. For the first time he realized the girl had not only helped him face the past but had given him a chance to change the future, to right the wrongs, and to confront the fear that had haunted him for so long. As the first light of dawn filtered through the broken windows, he looked at the girl and finally smiled, a small tired smile filled with relief and gratitude. She returned the smile and without a word turned and walked toward the doorway, her figure disappearing into the morning mist, leaving him alone with the journal, the photographs, and the letters. He felt the city waking around him, the distant hum of traffic, the chirping of birds, the faint sounds of life returning, and he understood that he had survived the night, and survived himself. He stepped outside the building, the air crisp on his face, and he held the metal box closed, the journal tucked under his arm. He mounted his bike and started the engine, feeling the vibrations beneath him, the city stretching out before him filled with possibilities. He realized he was no longer running from the past, he was carrying it with him, facing it and understanding it, ready to make different choices, ready to live differently. The shadows of the night lingered briefly behind him, but they were no longer threatening, only reminders of what he had faced and overcome. The road stretched ahead, the girl nowhere in sight, but her presence felt like a guiding hand, and he knew that she had changed his life forever. He rode into the city streets, the morning light reflecting off the chrome of his bike, the weight of secrets lifted slightly by the courage of a child who had known more than she should have and had forced him to see what he could not see alone. And as he rode, he felt the strange mixture of fear and freedom, the pulse of possibility in his veins, the city alive around him, and he realized that this was not the end but a beginning, that the note, the journey, the girl, the shadows, all had led him here to a moment where he could finally breathe and face the world, knowing that he had survived the darkness and that the truth no longer terrified him. The journal and the letters rested against his chest, the metal box, cold and heavy in his hands, a reminder of everything that had happened and everything that was still possible. He rode faster and slower at the same time, his mind replaying the night, the clues, the girl, and the shadows, and he smiled quietly, knowing that he had been tested and had endured, and that from now on, every choice he made would be with open eyes and an unburdened heart. The city lights blurred past him, the wind whipping against his face, and he felt alive in a way he had not felt in years. The note on the bike, the warning, the clues, the journey through the alleys, the warehouse, and the abandoned building had led him to a truth he had ignored for too long, and he knew that the small girl who had left the note had saved him not from something outside but from himself. And with that realization, he rode into the morning, ready to face whatever came next, knowing he would never forget the night, the note, and the courage of a child who had made him confront his deepest fears.